So, fun fact, Breath of the Wild was the original reason why I decided to start doing all these videos in the first place. Initially, I was wanting to play just this game before Tears of the Kingdom came out, but then I thought it would be fun to play through most of the mainline titles before the newest one was released, and I figured making videos on all of them would help pass the time until then. But I think I'm finally ready to put a close on the Zelda Marathon with, at least before 2023, the biggest Zelda game of them all.
I was very excited for Breath of the Wild before its release, and I'm talking a long time before, back when we still only knew the title as just Zelda Wii U. I remember when Eiji Aonuma announced that the next game in the series was going to redefine and rethink the conventions of Zelda, and this was right after A Link Between Worlds, which offers players complete freedom in completing the dungeons in low roll. And freedom was the major theme they wanted to go for. With the small bits of gameplay we were shown here and there, we were promised a massive Hyrule for us to explore, but man was this game painful to wait for. In between those moments of silence, it was so amazing to see gameplay, whether it was blurry off-screen gameplay or 10 seconds of Link on a horse in the grassy fields. I watched the Treehouse event for hours on end, I had the 2017 Switch presentation trailer on loop, and I begged my mom for weeks to let me buy a Nintendo Switch just so I could experience the next chapter in the Zelda series. One day I was just sitting on the couch in our living room only to be assaulted by plastic. Mom stopped by Walmart on her way home from work and came home with a copy of Zelda for the Switch, telling me that we would order my Switch in the next couple of days. But man, waiting those couple of weeks for the system to arrive was excruciating. I was staring at the equivalent of an engine without a car, a chain with no bicycle, a case of pencil lead with no pencil, a Wii U with no third-party support. Oh, wait a minute.
But if we thought the wait for it was painful enough, imagine what the developers were going through when they were making the damn thing.
According to returning director Hidemaru Fujibayashi, breaking the conventions of the Zelda series was a goal right from the start of development for Breath of the Wild, but in a sense, the development team was also wanting to bring the series back to its roots in the mid-80s. In a sense, they wanted to make a modern version of the original Legend of Zelda game on the NES, but with a world 12 times the size of the Hyrule Field found in Twilight Princess. The physics engine was a big priority that they wanted to get right, because part of their goal for the game was to combine the physics engine and the combat system to expand combat, but also to be used in creative and new ways in solving puzzles and traversing the world. But to achieve everything that they wanted to do, the Zelda team knew that they needed some more manpower, and that's when they would come across Monolith Soft. Nintendo fans may already know this development studio for the Xenoblade Chronicles series, but they've had their part in helping develop Zelda games since Skyward Sword, but their involvement was much more prominent with Breath of the Wild, in which their role was focused on the topographic arrangements of the game's open world. With over 5 years of development and tons of hype centered around advertisement, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was released on both the Nintendo Wii U and the Nintendo Switch on March 3rd, 2017.
Man, it is hard to believe that both the Nintendo Switch and Breath of the Wild released more than 6 years ago. But I think I'm finally ready to put a bow on this Zelda Marathon, so come on guys, let's grab our paragliders and let's take a look at the story of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
So remember when I said that Skyward Sword takes place at the very beginning of the timeline? Well, Aonuma must have looked at the timeline again, because he probably sat down and said, I don't wanna. Breath of the Wild doesn't have a definitive timeline placement. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, the timeline itself never did to begin with, and Breath of the Wild's story doesn't rely on any major story elements from previous games, so there's no need to play any of the other games before starting this one just to understand the story. All you need to know is that the game takes place long after the events of Ocarina of Time, and by long, I mean at least 10,000 years afterwards. Our story begins with our newest incarnation of Link waking up from within this mysterious chamber. A disembodied voice calls Link to take this Wii U gamepad, the Sheikah Slate, and with it he makes his way outside to find himself on the Great Plateau, a large elevated landmass near the center of Hyrule. While taking in his surroundings, he encounters this old man who helps Link adjust to the unfamiliar environment and points him in a general direction to start his journey. This leads Link to activate one of the many dormant Sheikah towers, causing the others throughout the land to rise, and also activates the surrounding Sheikah shrines as well. With the tower activated, the mysterious voice tells Link that he's been asleep for the last 100 years, and begs him to hurry before the beast surrounding Hyrule Castle regains his strength. The old man reveals the beast as Calamity Ganon, a vile entity that brought the kingdom to its knees a century ago. Despite Link having none of his memories from before he woke up, he still intends to venture to the castle and take Ganon down. Doing so would require Link to get off the Great Plateau, and Yeah, that's not an option. The old man offers his paraglider in exchange for treasure that lies within these 4 shrines on the plateau, so Link sets out to do so, upgrading his Sheikah Slate along the way. With all 4 shrines completed, the old man asks Link to meet him atop the ruined Temple of Time, where he reveals himself as the spirit of King Roam Bosphorus Hyrule. Over a century ago, a prophecy was given to the royal family that Ganon's return was clear and the power to oppose it lied buried, so heeding those words, the king ordered a search for the ancient relics used by the kingdom's ancestors to drive Ganon back 10,000 years prior. Those relics being the larger-than-life divine beasts and the autonomous guardians. Champions were chosen from the 4 corners of the kingdom to pilot the divine beasts, and along with the princess set to inherit a sacred stealing power and the courageous knight who wielded the Blade of Evil's Bane, they were prepared to face the Demon King. But Ganon saw through their plan and corrupted the guardians and the divine beasts using his malice and unleashed his new army upon Hyrule. The champions lost their lives, the population of Castletown was reduced to ash, and the kingdom was ultimately decimated. Princess Zelda faced Ganon alone as the sole survivor and has been able to keep him at bay for the last 100 years. Link was the courageous knight who protected Zelda as her bodyguard, but he suffered grave injuries that almost killed him. Sheikah warriors took him to the Shrine of Resurrection to revitalize him, with Zelda returning the Master Sword to its pedestal for it to recover. The king asks that Link somehow save Zelda and annihilate Ganon, and he gives Link his paraglider to begin his journey.
And from there on out, how you finish the story? It's entirely up to you.
Breath of the Wild gives the player the most freedom to explore since the original Legend of Zelda on the NES, and literally anything you set out to do is entirely your decision. You can go through the tutorial on the Great Plateau and then immediately head over to Hyrule Castle to fight Calamity Ganon. You can free all the Divine Beasts from Ganon's influence, or maybe only 1 or 2 of them, or none of them. You can complete all the shrines throughout Hyrule. You can restore the power to the Sheikah Research Labs, and you can go to the Lost Woods and pull out the Master Sword, the blade that's really efficient at inducing cardiac arrest. I am very appreciative that the game gives me that much freedom, but I'm also the type of person who wants to experience as much of a story in a Zelda game as possible, so I decided to go ahead and help the Divine Beast out. What the game sort of suggests to you is to head over to Kakariko Village where you'll meet with the Elder Impa, who gives Link the quest of freeing the Divine Beast from Ganon's influence. This will lead you to the home of the Zoras in Zora's Domain, the hot as fuck Death Mountain, home of the Gorons, assuming you could even make it there without burning to death, the Rito Village, home of the returning Rito tribe from the Wind Waker, and the Gerudo Town, home of the Gerudo tribe who returned from Ocarina of Time. Heading into these areas with the Divine Beast is where things begin to feel a little familiar to longtime Zelda fans. Each Divine Beast follows the basic structure of entering the area, meeting with the leader of the respective tribe, you get a flashback of Link interacting with the champion, you work with a descendant of the champion to board the Divine Beast, and purge the large robot of Ganon's influence, freeing the champion's spirit in the process. I understand why each beast quest is like this, since I imagine they didn't want one beast to prioritize another, so they make them similar enough to try and retroactively fix that issue. Going after the Divine Beast does show how samey they all can be, but that isn't really the main issue I have with them. I don't think we get shown enough about the champions in cutscenes, and I understand it's hard to have cutscenes with dead people, but maybe you could have had like 3 or 5 more per area where they have more interactions with Link, Zelda, and each other, and that would have probably fixed that issue. You know, flesh them out a bit more so we get a better idea of what they were like when they had flesh. Now don't get me wrong, I really do like the champions as characters. Mipha is an absolute sweetheart, Daruk is a bro, although I'd hate to get any physical backpats or anything from him.
But mark my words, I'll protect this land of ours to the death. Right, little guy?
Urbosa's strong and confident in her abilities while still having a soft side, acting as a mother figure for Zelda, and Revali is an asshole. But I really wanted to see more of them, and I understand that in the present time, yeah, that. But through the other memories that Link recovers throughout the game, we just don't see enough of them. Primarily because these other cutscenes mainly show off the struggles of Princess Zelda and her relationship with Link. God, I feel so bad for this iteration of the character. She's forced by her father to devote her time purely to training to unlock the sacred power needed to seal Ganon away, and despite her doing that, as well as trying to contribute to Sheikah Tech research, she's still scolded and embarrassed by her father, despite her doing everything possible. Not helping things is her case of imposter syndrome, especially whenever she sees how successful Link is in his role as the chosen hero. And by the time she is able to awaken her abilities, everyone she knows and loves is already gone. And after all of that, she's still kept Ganon sealed within the castle for the last century. It's definitely the most tragic version of the character so far, and Breath of the Wild was one of the first video games to make me genuinely tear up from its narrative. I have to give it credit despite its issues, and one of them, partially anyway, is Link himself. I'm not gonna lie, especially after going through games like Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and especially Skyward Sword, I was a bit disappointed that Link is this unexpressive in these cutscenes. To give a little credit to the game, there is a reason for that. He feels he needs to remain steadfast and silent because so many people look up to him as the hero. I'll give the developers credit for actually giving a reason why Link is silent this time around, but why can't he at least smile here or there? I mean, for fuck's sake, he didn't kill this one. And unfortunately, this is a point of contention for both before and after he loses his memories. Now, during gameplay, when he's cooking a delicious looking meal or when he's interacting with the great fairies, oh, he's an absolute cinnamon roll. I think for the story cutscenes, they struggled trying to keep Link as that sort of avatar character meant to represent the player in game, and to make him more of his own character, especially because in Breath of the Wild, characters actually refer to him as Link, since not only is there full voice acting this time around, but you also can't name Link anything you want to anymore. I think it was probably the best choice to have the other characters refer to him as Link, and I don't think doing something like, say, in Persona 5 would have been as effective. But despite all those small issues, this is still one of my favorite incarnations of Link in the series, and part of that reason is because of some of his feats before becoming a champion. You can find out a lot about this stuff through talking to NPCs and reading journals, or you can read about some of them in the Creating a Champion book. You don't need to read this to further enjoy the story, but it is a really interesting read. Like, did you guys know that Link's had the Master Sword since he was about 12 or 13 years old? Or that he was winning duels with Hylian soldiers when he was a child? Damn, this toddler got hands. With the Divine Beasts all restored to normal, Link heads straight for Hyrule Castle for a rematch with Ganon, but with the time he's had to prepare, Calamity Ganon has attempted to construct a new physical body for himself, and I don't know why, but I might have a pretty big hunch as to why that is. The Divine Beasts launch their barrage on Ganon, and Link musters all the courage he has to wipe out this calamitous abomination. Link comes out on top, but Ganon slips out to Hyrule Field and transforms into the malice-infested Dark Beast Ganon. Zelda hits Link up with the light arrows, and the two work together to take the beast down. Link deals the final blow, and without wasting a beat, Zelda unleashes a goddess-sized spirit bomb, and Calamity Ganon is no more. With the kingdom saved, Link and Zelda set out to begin building Hyrule back to its former glory, and give the tribes of Hyrule some closure, ending Breath of the Wild. This is far from a perfect narrative, and there's a small part of me that's disappointed that it didn't beat out the story of Skyward Sword, but I still managed to get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Oh, shit. I didn't realize we were going to be here for this long, but anyway, now that we're done talking about the story, let's hop on into the gameplay, and I hope you guys got a snack or a beverage on standby, because, we're going to be here for a bit.
Starting with Link himself, the motion control combat of Skyward Sword is gone, but Link can still do everything he could previously, with the exception of rolling. Rest in peace, old friend. But he can charge up his spin attack again, which was an odd omission from last time. You can't hold it forever though, since it takes a lot of stamina to hold the charge. Aside from the basics, Link also has a few new moves up his sleeve. So Link can jump now, like without a rock feather type of jump. About damn time. Auto jumping, which has been a long-running feature in 3D Zelda, has now been removed, which thank God! It hasn't given me much trouble since Wind Waker, but I ain't gonna miss this at all. Link can shoot his bow in the air now, and when he does, he enters this sort of bullet time that depletes stamina at a pretty decent rate, but you can shoot a ton of arrows during this time, and in combination with some welcome motion-controlled aiming, it gives you almost a godlike precision. It's so satisfying unleashing a ton of arrows onto a strong opponent, or take down a ton of enemies at once like I'm a John Wick Legolas hybrid. Link's combat is about as simple as it was in Ocarina of Time, but it has some additions like the Shield Bash from Skyward Sword, the bullet time bow shots, and the new Flurry Rush. If you dodge an attack at the last possible second, you slow time down and unleash a shit ton of attacks on the opposing force. I loved this ability the first time I played the game at launch, but especially after playing games like Bayonetta and shit, even Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I love this ability even more, at least until my weapon breaks and then I become a big sad boy. Okay, opening up that can of worms now, are we? Alright, well first we should talk about the different types of weapons that Link can get in this game. Now, normally in previous games, your weapon was always some sort of sword, like the Kokiri sword, the Master Sword, the Razor Sword, etc. Weapons in Breath of the Wild fall under 3 different categories of one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons, and spear weapons. The one-handed weapons consist of sticks, swords, soup ladles, boomerangs, and magic rods. These weapons are also the only ones that can be used simultaneously with shields, just like previous games. The two-handed weapons are your great swords, axes, sledgehammers, claymores, and a shit ton of other things. These weapons are slower but pack a bit more damage. Spears consist of harpoons, halberds, pitchforks, tridents, drill shafts. Mops, my boy, cleanliness is what all true warriors strive for. These weapons are quick on the draw and fly in a straighter trajectory when thrown, but they aren't as powerful as other weapon types. Each weapon has its own version of the spin attack, and certain weapons within the individual types have special properties such as elemental effects or durability and damage enhancements. This opens up a lot of possibilities for combat and exploration, but don't assume you can go willy-nilly with your equipment, because this time around, your weapons, shields, and bows have multiple degrees of durability, and unlike Skyward Sword, you can't restore the durability, so once it's broken, it's gone. At first, this may seem like it would be annoying to deal with, and it can be at some parts of the game. But Breath of the Wild gives you so many different weapons to find and fight enemies with that I never really found this to be an issue. Exploration is better than ever before, since not only is there something to do and see at every corner of Hyrule, but because of Link's ability to climb everything, it opens up the world to heights once thought impossible. And yeah, I mean everything. If Link has enough stamina, you can climb the tallest mountains in Hyrule. It feels so rewarding to do so, especially when you come across terrain that's very uneven. Finding your own ways to clear out enemy camps and settlements, avoid encounters with larger enemies with a distraction, or pulling off crazy maneuvers in general, that is the true magic of Breath of the Wild's world. But not only is Breath of the Wild's world magical, it'll also fucking kill you. There are plenty of things out in Hyrule that want your ass. From your run-of-the-mill bokoblins to oddly buffed moblins, and while they may seem primitive at first, don't write them off just yet. Especially in the early game, these bastards won't hesitate to rupture your asshole. Enemy AI in general is really smart, so while they may seem dumb, they will not hesitate to do anything in their power to take you down. Actually, a lot of the weapons you find around Hyrule are more often than not in the hands of powerful enemies, and they'll use anything that they can get their hands on. They can throw hands, they can throw rocks, and they can throw each other. Sadly, while these enemies can be extremely smart, they aren't very diverse. We're going to be seeing the same enemies across the entirety of Hyrule, and that's because their idea of different enemy types is making previous enemies a newer color with more health. Zelda games have done this before, but because there are only 11 different normal types of enemies, sometimes it feels a bit dull killing the enemies that I just killed in Death Mountain, and now I'm fighting them again in, say, Zora's Domain or the Gerudo Desert. Now, sometimes enemies have elemental variants, but this is limited to just 3 of those enemy types, and they don't show up nearly as often. They can also come across some overworld bosses scattered around, and some of these guys can give you a run for your rupees if you aren't careful. Hinoxes are slow, and they aren't really the smartest of Ganon's army, but they hurt. A lot. Stone Taluses can only be hurt on their jewel-like weak spot. Sometimes getting on top of these things can be the true challenge, because they can knock you off, and they can also launch their appendages at you. Well, Dukas can be a pain because they burrow in the ground and only come up to chomp your ass, but they're very weak to bombs. But your biggest organic threat in the open wilds of Hyrule is by far the Lynels. These fuckers hit like semi-trucks, and if they spot you trying to sneak around, you're getting pelted with elemental arrows. But wait, that's just the natural enemies of Hyrule. Your biggest threat, period, are the Guardians. These guys have a lot of health, and not only are they quick, they fucking hurt. If you're gonna throw hands with the Guardian, be sure you're going to be able to take them down. Ow. With so much shit out there ready to feast on your innards, you're going to need more than skills to stay alive. Breath of the Wild does give players a large amount of armor sets to choose from, both for the offensive and defensive player. No matter what build you prefer, the game has you covered, and using the Great Fairies allows you to upgrade these armor sets using various materials you can collect. Upgrading them enough can even give you some set bonuses for certain armor sets, like using less stamina while dashing in the water, or the beam from your Master Sword doing more damage. Whenever you're out and about, you'll find plenty of flora and fauna that Link can collect. Don't hesitate to dedicate some time to go hunting or scavenging, because these materials can save your life if used effectively, whether to use in upgrading armor sets, or cook meals with stat bonuses, and elixirs with different effects like speed up or armor up. They must have uploaded hundreds of episodes to MasterChef into Link's brain during his sleep, because some of the shit you can cook looks fucking delicious. Cooking food with specific ingredients will net you some effects meant to protect Link from his environment. Remember how you couldn't go into Death Mountain without the Goron tunic? Well, now that mindset has been applied to other environments like the desert or snowy peaks. If it's too cold, Link will start shivering and you need to either eat something with cold resistance or put on a warm jacket. And when he goes into the desert, he'll start having a heat stroke, so you need to apply stuff with heat resistance. And if it's really hot, like on, say, Death Mountain, just burst into flames. This is fine. But it's not just temperature you have to worry about, because the weather itself plays more of a part this time around. I hate it when it rains in this game because you keep slipping whenever you try to climb, and it takes up so much stamina just to get up one cliff while it's raining. And I guess no one let Raiden consult with the Elder Gods, because if you're wearing or carrying anything metal in a thunderstorm, Of course, knowing the lay of the land is pretty important on any journey, and by visiting the Sheikah Towers spread out throughout Hyrule, you can download the region's layout on your Sheikah slate, and you also get a nice layout of the land on top of these things. The towers and the Sheikah shrines also act as fast travel points, and that's always nice. Anyway, the world could be truly breathtaking at points with so many things to do and see, whether it's the ruins of an old town lost during the Calamity, a spring from ancient ages worn down by time, or the ruins of a tribe long gone. And maybe on your travels you might come across one of the many shrines scattered about. Like I mentioned earlier, Link will start the game by going through these 4 shrines and grabbing these 4 Sheikah runes for the Sheikah slate, being Magnesis, Stasis, Cryonis, and the Bomb rune. Bombs are bombs, obviously, but in addition to having an infinite number of them with a small recharge period, you can also use square bombs.
Wow, they have it square!
Cryonis allows Link to erect a pillar of ice on any body of water he finds. I don't tend to use it as often as the other abilities, but it's great for puzzle solving and traversal. Magnesis allows you to pick up and manipulate metal objects to open pathways, solve puzzles, or make your own solutions with the shit you find flying around. Magnesis lets you not only think outside the box, but also use said box as a weight or an effective beating weapon. Now, Stasis allows you to freeze an object in place. If you attack the object during this period, you start building up its potential energy, and when the timer's up, the object's kinetic energy is unleashed, and the object just zooms off in whatever direction you hit it last. What starts off as an ability that can be used for puzzle solving and combat transforms into the catalyst for Link becoming the biggest crackhead in gaming history. Used effectively, you can make like the pioneers and ride these babies for miles, and it makes for some of the most fun I've ever had in a Zelda game. I bring up the runes now and not earlier because these runes are almost integral for solving the shrines. These are pretty much smaller sized dungeons. I wouldn't say they're mini dungeons, more so bite-sized for lack of a better term. While they don't take very long to finish, they can be extremely satisfying to complete and have some damn creative puzzles. While the solution may be pretty obvious at some points, you can complete these puzzles in a completely unintended way. Completing them not only nets you new warp points, but also these spirit orbs, which may as well be the new heart pieces without actually being heart pieces. When you get 4 of them, you can go to one of the many goddess statues around Hyrule and exchange them for either heart containers for more health, or stamina vessels to increase your returning stamina gauge. So essentially, since there are 120 shrines, you have 120 spirit orbs that you can gather to either grant 30 hearts or 3 full stamina wheels. You can't have both though, so you need to pick and choose. You don't need to complete all the shrines. I mean, I did just for the sake of having some sort of 100% completion thing to go for. So if you're wondering when I'm going to start talking about the actual dungeons, well, that's the thing. While what Breath of the Wild considers dungeons, that being the Divine Beasts, have the spirit of traditional dungeons, they're not really like the dungeons you've come to know and love. This time around, the dungeons consist of you solving puzzles and moving the body parts or orientation of the Divine Beast to reach and activate 5 terminals that, when activated, grant you access to the boss. It's not really anything like the previous game's dungeons, aside from the solving the puzzles part and the boss part. And even though I might catch some flack for it, I'm more than happy that they're structured a bit differently this time around. This wasn't something I really thought of until after I got done playing the other games before this one, and all in a row nonetheless. But despite me really enjoying Skyward Sword's dungeons, I think I was getting a bit tired with the standard dungeon formula. Any desire I have to go through something like that is already satisfied with the shrines. I think that the traditional dungeon format needed a bit of a break, and if they do return in some form in Tears of the Kingdom, I will welcome them back with open arms, but for now, this was a nice change of pace. I think my only real problem with the Divine Beasts is that they all have the same aesthetic, and that problem sort of extends to the shrines as well. Bosses of these Divine Beasts, the Blight Ganons as they're called, are pretty damn cool. They're bastardized fusions of Malice and Sheikah Tech using abilities themed after the champions, and these motherfuckers hurt. They do go down like bitches with the Master Sword, though. Yeah, add that to the list of optional shit. You could head to the Lost Woods at any point after you get off the Great Plateau, and as long as you have enough hearts, you can pull the sword out and be on your merry way. To sort of balance things out, though, the Master Sword will run out of energy when used too often, and then it takes 10 minutes to recharge, but whenever you're in the vicinity of Malice or enemies infected with stuff, its damage and durability increase dramatically. And in combination with the Flurry Rush, you're the highly equivalent of... I need to watch more movies. To hop back to the Divine Beast bosses real quick, despite them all having a similar method of design, the fights themselves are fun, I think. Starting with Windblight Ganon, since I think he's probably the easiest of the 4. Being Windblight Ganon, it has access to wind-based attacks like tornadoes, and he tends to stay higher during the fight. The thing is also a bit of a sharpshooter, taking cues from the mech's asshole of a pilot. With Waterblight Ganon, it's a bit more graceful in its movements, and it also has the ability to summon ice blocks and raise the water level in Phase 2. Also a possible fan of Teddy Roosevelt. Fireblight Ganon is a bulky motherfucker. He can spawn a protective barrier around himself that can be blown up by a bomb, you dumb shit. And of course he enhances his moves with fire. Thunderblight Ganon may be the smallest one, but this little fucker is quick. It also uses a shield that blocks your attacks and rains these metal pillars from the sky, so you can shoot his lightning back up his own asshole. I had mentioned the overworld bosses earlier, but I did forget to mention Master Koga of the Yiga clan, which is essentially rogue Sheikah who worship Calamity Ganon. This fight was alright, I guess. I don't know, I think Age of Calamity spoiled me a bit on his character. Someone should tell these guys that this much potassium is not good for you. I now have the sudden urge to play Donkey Kong Country. But oh man, once you take the blights down, or hell, even right from the start of the game if you really want to, you can head over to Hyrule Castle, which is hands down the best final dungeon the series has ever had. You have one clear goal, get to the Sanctum, but how you get there is all up to you. Shit, how you enter the damn place is all up to you. I actually infiltrated the castle a few times to get some higher end weapons, a shrine, and the Hylian shield, which I guess is like the new de facto ultimate shield for the series? It makes sense. But good lord, this place is huge! You could reach Ganon a different way every time, and there's so much to explore before you get to the final battle. You can go through the underground mines, the library, the lockup, the gatehouses, the courtyard, or you can swim with the waterfalls and use your champion abilities to skip everything. And you know what? That's okay. That was probably intentional on the development team's part. Upon completion of the Divine Beast, you're blessed with one of 4 abilities: a health restore upon death, free updrafts whatever you like, a protective barrier that shields you from pretty much everything, and lightning strikes that deal massive damage. I really like these abilities, and not only did they provide Link with some great strength and world traversal in combat, but they also incentivize replayability. They do have lengthy recharge periods, much like the Master Sword, but I don't mind it too much. Now, pretty much everything I've talked about has been positive, extremely positive in fact, and while I do have some negatives, they are pretty small and not too annoying for me to deal with. Link's inventory slots for his equipment are a bit lacking at the start of the game. I kinda wish each category had at least one more slot to start with, but these can be upgraded using the Korok seeds you find scattered around the map. Never do you actually need to hunt them all down though. I was more than happy collecting about 50 or so. I also don't feel like collecting 900 of the fucking things. I think some armor sets have some really tedious material requirements to level up, especially the amiibo gear. Like I stated earlier, it sucks when it rains, but as far as gameplay goes, that's about it. Anything else, and I'd probably be nitpicking at this point. Since I already mentioned it, let's talk about amiibo real quick. You can scan any amiibo to get an assortment of material drops, but scanning in a Legend of Zelda series amiibo will spawn in a chest that can contain anything from high-end weapons and different arrow types to different weapons and clothing from previous games. Amiibo like Zelda and Ganondorf can net you their weapons from Twilight Princess, but the many, and I mean many, amiibo of Link's other incarnations can net you weapons and tunics they used and wore in previous games. I can ride Epona through the fields of Hyrule in HD as Ocarina of Time Link, and I can wield the Master Sword as Fierce Deity? You don't need these costumes to complete the game, but damn it, these are cool. I wasn't able to get some of these for the longest time since I don't have all the Zelda amiibo in my collection. But thanks to my buddy Corey, I got all these amiibo cards that work just as well. Thanks, Corey. The only Zelda amiibo that doesn't give materials or equipment is the Wolf Link amiibo, and that's because you can spawn him into the game as a companion. He hunts down wildlife, he teleports to you if he can't reach you, he's the goodest boy, and he throws hands. Or paws, I guess. The amount of hearts he has is determined by how many you had when you completed the Cave of Shadows in Twilight Princess HD. I didn't bother trying to increase them at all, much like the Twilight Princess video, and believe me, the last thing I needed was to fight muscle memory to get something I was only going to talk about for about 20 seconds. Now, I'm aware that there's still so much that I haven't talked about yet, and believe me, there's a lot. I didn't touch on taming horses, dyeing clothing, enemy weaknesses, enemy enhancements, camera mode, the Hyrule Compendium, the lore. There's just so much more to talk about, but I just don't have time to talk about absolutely everything. I will at least touch on the DLC. This was released in 2 packs throughout 2017 via the Master Trials and the Champions Ballad. Master Trials adds the aptly named Master Trials, as well as Master Mode, essentially the game's hard mode. Master Trials takes you through environment and enemy gauntlets to upgrade your Master Sword, and I hope we get something like this in the next game. Not necessarily to upgrade the Master Sword, because I'm pretty sure that's going to be a fucking given for Tears of the Kingdom, but just this type of challenge. You're stripped of all your equipment and have to start with nothing but your Sheikah abilities and whatever shit you find lying around. It's sort of like the challenge you can go through on Eventide Island, but on a much bigger scale. The Champions Ballad is essentially the story DLC. We get some extra cutscenes that add a little bit, but not much unfortunately. They added some more shrines as well as a new Divine Beast style dungeon. The 4 shrines added on the Great Plateau were good fun because you have to traverse around the area to get to each shrine with one hit, but you can kill enemies in one hit too. This can lead to great amounts of hilarity.
You really need to get out of there! You fool! You fool!
No, he's fine. He's fine.
He's good.
No, he's not.
I'm not fine.
You
The other 12 shrines have challenges you do to uncover them, and I'm not gonna lie, I wish we had more of these challenges like in the main game. You know, not to say that the main game was lacking in challenges, far from it actually, but I found these ones really fun. But that new dungeon, best part of the DLC. It's somewhat similar to what you do in the Divine Beasts, but the puzzles were pretty damn good. It all culminates into the boss fight because holy fuck, the battle with Monk Maz Koshia is legitimately one of the best Zelda boss fights we've ever gotten. And it's totally not because you can distract him with potassium poisoning. Upon completing it, you're granted access to the Master Cycle 0, and I honestly think the second DLC pack is worth it for this alone. I love just drifting around on this thing through the open plains of Hyrule. I do wish it had a bigger tank, but I get that in Mario Kart, so whatever. Can I say that I adore this art style? This game has the perfect blend of Wind Waker's cel shading, Twilight Princess's more realistic world design, and the gorgeous color palette of Skyward Sword. Characters and enemies look great, and the environment and structures all around Hyrule look fantastic. I think the music is, unfortunately, a mixed bag for me. The soundtrack has some bangers, don't get me wrong, but I don't really think the random jarbles of piano melodies was the way to go for some of these areas. I'm not saying there has to be a constant bombastic tune going, but maybe something like the nighttime theme of Hyrule Field from Twilight Princess. That's kind of like a general direction of where I'd like to see things go for the soundtrack. But when the music isn't piano noises, holy shit, it's good as hell. The main theme itself is so damn good and captures the themes of the game perfectly. Boss themes are great as well. My top two tracks, though, are the theme that plays in the 2017 Switch presentation trailer, that's not even in the game and I love it, and the song that plays when you're going through Hyrule Castle. You don't really hear too many songs in 4-5 time, and in the case of Hyrule Castle, it works so well. It's small, but the little scramble of piano keys that plays whenever you encounter a fully functional Guardian is anxiety incarnate. To finally begin wrapping things up, if you can't tell, I really love this game. The world is fun to explore and discover things in, I love the things that Link can do, the puzzles are great, and the sense of freedom and adventure are incredible. I have very few issues with the game, and I'm sure some of them will be rectified with the game's upcoming direct sequel. And if aspects like enemy variety, the weather, and parts of how the story was told are improved upon, we could have one hell of a video game on our hands. After playing all these games back to back for the first time, and with some careful consideration, I can say without a doubt that this is my favorite game in the series. It's a great evolution of the series, and I never turned down the opportunity to play it again. I can recommend this game to anyone, but if you're a Zelda fan who loves the traditional formula, be aware that this isn't your standard Zelda game. This is the next step for the franchise, and it breaks conventions and traditions in order to make that step. But if you don't mind that, or if you're new to the series, I absolutely believe that you owe it to yourself to play the current best game on the Nintendo Switch. Oh, and the Wii U, but nobody cares anymore.
Alright, so if I were to give these games a power ranking or a tier list or whatever it is the kids are doing nowadays, you know, where would these games stack up? Breath of the Wild is the king right now, and if you're wondering why, well, clearly you haven't been paying attention for the past 30 minutes. I don't know what to tell you. Majora's Mask was my previous favorite in the series, but after replaying Breath of the Wild, my opinions have shifted a little bit. It's still a fantastic game, though. I can play this time and time again and never get tired of it. Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword are tied for the number 3 spot. The former I love for its dungeons, and the latter I love for the story and its combat. Ocarina of Time is at number 5. It's still an amazing title, and I can go back and play it whenever. Link to the Past is at number 6. It's still great almost 30 years later. I thought Link's Awakening was okay. I was kind of disappointed I didn't like it as much as the others. And the same can be said about Wind Waker on a greater scale. I just didn't have that much fun with this. And there you go. That is my official Teddy Bear 2023 Legend of Zelda tier list as of May 28th when I'm recording this video. So, it's probably going to be updated in a little bit, and you guys will probably know why. But we have finally reached the end of the Zelda Marathon, and, you know, I gotta say, after playing through all of these games back-to-back for less than a year, I can see why the series has stuck around for almost 40 years. Each title has its own way of immersing the player in its world, while sending you on the adventures of a lifetime. If you like the idea of exploring labyrinths, collecting items, and bombing some Dodongos, try out a Legend of Zelda game. The series is one you owe it to yourself to check out if you somehow still haven't yet. You guys probably were wondering when the next time I'm going to be talking about the Zelda series is, like, for another marathon. I'm not planning another Zelda marathon for a while, especially with this being my first one. I want to take a break from marathons with really long games, so I'm going to be saving that second Zelda marathon for a few years from now, and we'll be tackling the handheld games. So I'm thinking like the Oracle games, Minish Cap, the Four Swords games, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, Link Between Worlds, Triforce Heroes, maybe? I don't know. But for the few who are wondering, why I didn't review Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, well, looking back, I think I probably should have still played Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, so I think sometime either later this year or early next year, I'll be taking a look at the original Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2, just so I have those under my belt as well. And as much as I want to talk about Tears of the Kingdom in the next video, I need a break from Zelda. Playing so many games back to back, I need just a small break. So, next video, we're going to be taking a look at the latest demo in a passionate fan project that I've been following for a while. So, I will see you guys next time with the silver release of Project 06. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. And there you go. There's the tier list. What the shit?